Hello, this is Jerry. Welcome back to the Old Testament prophets. We are in the middle of Daniel chapter 6. And last week we saw the exhaustive efforts of those jealous of Daniel to sabotage his career. And it culminated with a clever plot wherein the conspirators enticed King Darius to create a month-long law that restricted prayers to himself, a kind of King Darius month. And I can't imagine there were many netted by this law. I don't think henchmen were checking everyone for compliance around Babylon, but there were conspirators checking on Daniel. Their scheme had 3 phases. First, get this king to sign that 30-day law. Check. Second, find Daniel praying to the Lord God of Israel. No surprise, he was. So they checked that off too. And third, and easiest of all, tattle to the king and make sure he enforces this unalterable law. Now we ended class with this verse. Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. Checkmate. The conspirators had invested many hours into this sinister project to remove Daniel from the earth for the sole reason of him not being promoted over them, and perhaps keeping Daniel from making the system so squeaky clean that none of them could take their regular cuts from all that money, which is just what tax collectors did then. But that's just a guess. There was no more need of planning from this point. No phase 4 to somehow induce the lions to devour Daniel, because everyone knew what these lions would do. But these schemers gave no thought concerning the Most High God of Daniel, the one whom Daniel was praying to. Did any of them question, but what if his God intervenes? We're pretty sure Daniel's God was not a contingency factor in their minds. As I noted, Daniel was not fleeing Babylon, hiding, or making appointments with the king, desperately revealing his side of the story. Daniel was in his 80s, perhaps upper 80s. He was a wise old owl. He's learned to let the Lord take care of him, and maybe that's the way he was supposed to go, in the pit of lions. In 1935, C.S. Lewis wrote to his lifelong friend Arthur Greeves, "There is always some peace in having submitted to the right. Don't spoil it by worrying about the results if you can help it. It is not your business to succeed. No one can be sure of that, but to do right. When you have done so, the rest lies with God. And will. That is, it will lie with God." The king declared to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you." What a benediction from this pagan king! Employees like Daniel were keepers. The king greatly favored him, and he strongly hopes Daniel's God delivers him. He wasn't thinking at that time of whatever Babylonian gods Darius formally worships. And a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. Okay, the lions were in a pit too deep for them to climb out, but there was a cut stone that was fitted for the opening, and maybe this was put on every night. But this time some sort of soft wax was used with the king's royal seal and that of his lords impressed into it. This is all very official. No one could rescue Daniel and claim, he was there all night, or sneak him out of the city and say, the lions devoured him. Now, what was it like in the pit? Well, like this. It was dark, with that stone over top. Probably doesn't smell too well. And there's hungry lions in there. Now, lions primarily hunt and feed at night in the wild. Their vision is 6 times better at night than humans because of a reflective layer behind their retinas that amplifies what little star or moonlight there is. Let's see how artists have pictured this event. And let's go chronologically, beginning with the early church and their art in the burial catacombs outside Rome. The early Christians identified with being plotted against and even at times being thrown to the lions and other wild animals in the Roman public games. Now, all 3 of these pictures have 2 lions with the person's hands in the air in prayer or praise. Daniel could hardly have imagined that this event would be read and captured artistically again and again by God's people as encouragement, because they also were plotted against and persecuted. Then Daniel and the lions was a motif on ancient Roman funerary art, perhaps pointing to that person having been persecuted like Daniel. Then in the Dark and Middle Ages, on church buildings, because this is now also architectural art, there's a lot of symmetry. Did you notice? Notice on the left picture, the 6 lions artistically placed, and a very monk-like Daniel in the center. And on the right, the lions with the same upright pose opposite each other, and Daniel's hands raised in prayer or praise. Art and biblical message together. And I must show you these 2. In each, Daniel is leaning on his right hand, and so at peace he's almost bored. And the lions in both have the same pose. Even on the left, each lion lending their big paws on Daniel's knees. Then we come to Peter Paul Rubens in the 17th century. He was a Flemish artist in Antwerp. Note the 9 growly, grumpy lions, but most are not looking at him. And see the human bones scattered around, including a skull, reminding us of what they normally did with people. A younger-looking Daniel prays to God. This is a huge painting in the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., about 11 by 7 feet. And here's the 19th century Frenchman Gustave Doré in 1866. 7 lions, a ray of light from above, which here seems to point to divine favor. Some of the lions are curious, others not. Next we have Breton Rivière from 1872. He's British but of French descent. Again, bones lying around. The lions are very focused on Daniel, like he was a great mystery to them, especially with that alpha male in the center who is mesmerized by this man. Daniel's hands are tied behind him, and he faces them. Again, 7 lions. 20 years later, the same artist again on Daniel. The lions are still quite intrigued, but this time more subdued and submissive, and all their mouths were shut. And 7 lions again. And now to art from our times. I really liked this piece, though I could not find the artist's name. How many lions? 7. And these are the most content lions we've seen, outside of the architecture. And it looks like Daniel's right hand is actually upon the back of a lion. See how close they all are to him. Daniel is active in his prayer or praise here. And this by Hilly at Things by Design store on Etsy. I purchased a download. And the 5 huge lions are subdued, a few quite aware but unconcerned by Daniel. And that divine light showing God's favor and protection in the darkness. Now how about this for your coffee table? A nice and cozy sculpture available on Etsy through Biblical Sculptures, Daniel is nestled quite comfortably among these big lions. Scott Gustafson's art shows a lot of spiritual focus of Daniel in that divine light from above. Notice the hefty size of the lions and the very curious expression of that top lion, like, "What are you?" Finally, Jephthah Gonsa's masterful art here, with God's strong angel protecting Daniel with 4 lions visible. Daniel is looking to God, and the angel is focused on the lions, fulfilling the prayers of Daniel. And the lions were having a bit of an unusual day. Now let's return to our story. Daniel was sealed within the lion's pit. And then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him. The king was so upset he didn't eat or sleep or watch Netflix. He really did care for Daniel as a person, and I would guess he's terribly mad at himself for being lured into that trap. Then at break of day the king arose and went in haste to the den of lions. As he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" So Darius returned to the pit first thing in the morning, had the stone lid removed, and peered into the darkness. And catch how the king refers to Daniel's God. "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" The king called Daniel's God the living God, and perhaps the one who actually did something as the living God, like deliver Daniel. I think the king has seen something of the living God through the person of Daniel, don't you? Then Daniel said to the king, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him, and also before you, O king. I have done no harm." Daniel's first recorded words in this chapter. My God did save me by his angel. And because Daniel cares for the king, he wanted him to know that he was not guilty of doing any harm to him. What Daniel said was so much more substantive and important than that silly 30-day law. His conscience was clear before his God and his king. Wouldn't we love to hear Daniel speak these sentences? I'm sure he was very joyful. Unless God had given him assurance of deliverance beforehand, he would not have known the outcome. God delivered him and glorified himself in the court of Darius. Then the king was exceedingly glad, and commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. They inspected Daniel, like others had inspected Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego out of the fiery furnace. No harm at all, even from this 80-something-year-old man being thrown down into, had to be at least a pretty deep pit to hold the lions. God was gracious. All pointed very clearly to a miracle by Daniel's God, and also vindicating him as innocent in the eyes of heaven. And Daniel's words to the king connected those dots as well. He had done nothing against God or the king to deserve this punishment, which only made more plain the obvious guilt of the schemers. These unscrupulous administrators were not thinking of the best for the nation or the king, but just for themselves. Those are not the kind of high-level administrators he wanted. This whole conspiracy revealed these administrators for who they really were, just like the ordeal showed Daniel for who he really was. and something of the Most High God, and something of the king, how much he cared for and appreciated Daniel. Now, if the king was taking Daniel for granted, he was not now. The whole event gave sharp clarity about all those involved. And the king commanded, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions, they, their children, and their wives. And before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces. Well, I know it's shocking that their families were executed as well. That was generally the way for the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians, and so many others in the ancient world. On this kind of high crime against the king, the government just wanted to remove the whole family from the earth. Nobody left to sow seeds of dissent, or grow up and seek revenge or plot a coup. This story provides a vivid picture of Proverbs 26:27, don't you think? Whoever digs a pit will fall into it. If someone rolls a stone, it will roll back on them. Imagine the loyalty and work ethic displayed from then on with all these satraps and other administrators under Daniel. The fear of the Most High God was put into them, we think. Daniel probably has pretty good employees now, not troublemakers. And for the king, this event and what he has learned is just too good not to share. Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, "Peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. And he who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions." So out of King Darius came praise for the Most High God, similar to what King Nebuchadnezzar decreed earlier. He is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. That is, he is above all humanity, above kings like himself, who will only have temporary kingdoms. His dominion was always over all of them. No doubt Darius had time to reflect on that whole story, the conspiracy against Daniel, and how the Most High God had so worked all around and through the situation. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions. And this decree would reverberate outward. I'm sure the people of God there in exile read this decree as well and learned the story. Remember what is happening in their lives. This is not long after the fall of Babylon, and Cyrus will soon be allowing the Jews to return to Judah and Jerusalem. However, a little before those first Jews left for Jerusalem, probably, there was this memorable deliverance story concerning those conspirators, the king, Daniel, and the lion's pit. And then that decree about the Lord from Darius would authenticate the veracity of this story. It wasn't made up. It's great timing to remind all of God's people that the Lord is alive and well, still working through his people and glorifying himself, a faith builder, another encouragement to God's people. So this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. This is a great final word on Daniel. God was prospering him. He had been taken as a youth from his home, placed in Babylon, educated and trained in all things Babylonian, but though he lived most of his life in Babylon, he never lost sight of the Most High God. And it's interesting how Daniel brought truth to the Jewish nation in exile. not directly through teaching them that we know of, but his example as he lived in the royal court. God placed him there, unlike Ezekiel, who was directly preaching to the Jews at that time. And when the kings that hold you captive as a nation are singing the praises of your God, and the kings that gloat against Israel are set aside, like Belshazzar, all that definitely has a faith-building effect on you. Daniel was a missionary to the Babylonian and Persian courts, with the result that both Nebuchadnezzar and Darius published edicts about the greatness of the Most High God of Daniel. And if both kings were so impressed, we can only guess how many others in the court were also impressed as well. God used Daniel and his 3 friends as instruments for his glory to bring truth to the royal court, and to give us more of God's revelation in the book of Daniel for his people of all time. As well, to build the growing faith of God's people in exile, and truly of us as well. That's why these stories are here in the Bible. It matters not how many years ago this happened, because neither God nor humanity has changed. The story is timeless and has not tarnished a bit over the centuries. We are inspired to be more like Daniel in regular prayer, in trust, in that excellent spirit he had in everything he did. And we are in awe of the sovereign God, who, yes, he allowed all these expressions of evil by the conspirators, but so wonderfully worked all things for his glory and Daniel's good, and for the spread of the Lord's truth. Well, truths to ponder, I hope. Next week, Lord willing, we'll be starting the book of Ezra, which picks up right with the reign of Cyrus. Daniel chapter 6 ends the stories of Daniel, and what follows are various prophecies for the future. That would be a good study on its own someday. But I want to stay with the historical flow we have going and not take a 6-month study on these prophecies. My plans are to return to these prophecies, though, Lord willing, after we finish the book of Malachi, because I hope to give you an overview of the intertestamental period, or that approximately 400 years between the Old and New Testaments, as many of Daniel's prophecies provide an overview of that future history. Okay, thanks very much.